I think you have to look at a few things internally of how much time are you able to commit to this business? How much money do you have able to commit to this business, both for marketing and systems cost, as well as the cost for the actual acquisition of the land? And why are you doing this business?
Welcome, everybody, to the Big Picture Blueprint. I'm your host, Dan Haberkost, along with Mason McDonald, and we have a special show today where Mason and I will be doing listener questions. These are all questions submitted by our listeners on social media. Before we get into that, how's it going, Mason?
Things are good. Business is business. I've got a lot of great deals going on and some ups and downs, but that's the entrepreneurial roller coaster that I signed up for. But very excited for this show. I think a lot of these questions that I'm seeing on this list are relatively similar. So hopefully we can answer these questions in a way that is applicable to a lot of people in a lot of different businesses beyond just the land business. And it'll be good.
Yeah, I agree. And so that's why we wanted to start with one in particular that I think is on a lot of people's mind in really every real estate niche, but especially in the land business. And that is, do you think mail is dead? Mason, what do you say?
No, I do not think mail is dead. Recently, we've gone back and looked at the data from where every single deal that we've done has come from. And a vast majority of the deals that we have ever done have come from direct mail. And I think, for me now, I'm testing social media. I've done a lot of cold calling and texting within the business. And still, I think the greatest level of return is direct mail. I don't know why people would think mail is dead. I think what happens a lot of times with any sort of marketing or any sort of action that you take in business at all, your sample size is not large enough for you to determine if there's any statistical significance of whether or not the deal or whether or not that strategy is working. So I think within mail, I've seen varying levels of result for the type of mail that I've sent, where the greatest response rate for the mailers that I've sent have been either blind or blank offers. Blind offers meaning that I'm actually putting a dollar amount related to the land that I'm purchasing, or a blank offer, which is the exact same thing as a blind offer, except I leave a fill in the blank for that cash amount. And then my next greatest response mailers have been my property tax mailer card, focusing on why are you still paying property taxes for your unused land, as well as a building postcard that I copied from you, which is very kind of construction building focused of, if you're not planning on building on your land, give us a call type of thing. But Dan, what about for you? Is mail dead?
So short answer, no, absolutely not. And I have a number of thoughts here. But probably the biggest is two things. People who've been in the business for a number of years, the ridiculous returns that we could get on mail 5 years ago, just the point of reference that's given many people, they're suddenly thinking, oh, I have to send 4,000 or 5,000 mailers to get a deal. It must be dead. Well, no, it's still a great business. If you can send 4,000 mailers at 60 cents or 63 cents a mailer and make 20 or 30 grand on that, that's still great, number one. Number two, I think there's still a lot of people that are selling education within land that are pitching it as if it's just insanely easy and if it's still as it was 10 years ago. And that's giving a lot of people a very misleading idea of what it takes to get a land deal. And then number three, there is a conflation of trying to send mailers to get a deal in Southwest Florida versus doing business in Wisconsin or, these more rural, less competitive areas where you probably still can get a deal for 500 or 1,000 mailers. So I think there's a number of things that are kind of creating that sentiment, but it's just more like any other business. People are complaining about competition, but I mean, our podcast episode that came out today, the 16th of September, is all about a guy, Josh is his name. Listen to that episode if you want to hear a pretty incredible story, but started a wholesaling business for single family houses in San Diego in 2024. Very, very successfully. And people would say that's impossible. And it's all based around direct mail. So no, mail's not dead. It's a bit harder. You have to mail consistently for a long time. You have to be very on top of your follow-up. And you have to be or have good salespeople, right? It's a more normal business. You can't just be totally incompetent and throw crap at the wall and hope it sticks, right? You got to be intentional, consistent, and skilled in your follow-up.
Agreed. Yeah. So a lot of times you have to look at your internal processes before necessarily writing off a particular lead generation strategy. And then on that, even if it takes you 10,000 pieces of mail to get one deal, I mean, that's what, $6,300. There's a lot of companies out there that are paying $500 to $1,000 to $2,000 per lead for similar deal sizes to what mine and Dan's median land deal size is, which is probably right around that $15,000 to $25,000 profit per deal. And I mean, that's a great assignment fee for a house wholesale deal where these people are paying $1,000 per lead, and that's not per deal. And I don't even know what my cost per lead is, to be honest. But it's a lot less than $1,000. I mean, I think our cost per lead is probably closer to, $75 to $150, depending on the marketing channel that we're actually using. So mail is definitely not dead. You have to send more of it. And just like Dan said, the response rate is going to be dictated a lot of the time by the market that you're in. And the fun thing about mail, like I was mentioning, is you have the opportunity to split test really easily and try kind of different templates or different mailers within the same market. And you can send it to the exact same person too. Sometimes it takes us 6 or 7 mail touches before we ever actually get a call. So keep sending mail if that's what your marketing strategy is. And if not, it's a great tool to add to your tool belt.
One more thing I just want to say on that, because this is so important. I think one of the biggest things that hurts people is getting away from what works and not being consistent in one or two strategies. So it's important to be constantly testing new areas, in my opinion. We got a market in Florida. I think I sent mail there in June for the first time ever. And I think it was 700 mailers we sent. We got 2 deals. One we bought at 52 and it's under contract to sell at 92. It was at about 2 weeks on market. And one we bought at 50. It's listed at 89. We'll probably sell it at 80 to 85. And that was off of 700 mailers. So when you're consistently mailing and keeping your core markets going and then trying new areas, you occasionally get these outsized returns. And you never know when or where they're going to come, but they have consistently come for me, at least over the last 5-6 years. And so those really help to improve your overall numbers. So you just got to be consistent to find those sort of outsized returns.
Makes sense. So I think we could probably hammer the direct mail point for an entire episode, but let's get to another question. Here's one. How much DD do y'all do before you go under contract? Dan, what's your answer on that?
Depends on the market. However, to give a better answer there, I tend to be more of the mindset that I don't like canceling contracts, and especially because in the attorney states and depending on the title company in some of the title states, you end up paying even if you fall out of contract for the title search and the work that the attorney or escrow company does. Not always, but you can check this ahead of time. And I don't like to be constantly canceling on sellers, and it creates a lot of headache. I don't like that model. Granted, some people do it without a problem. So we usually know, barring doing a PERT test, or in some markets it takes literally weeks to get an answer on utilities. So sometimes we'll do as much work as we can to determine whether there's utilities there, but might put it under contract before we have an official answer. But most of the time we know, hey, once we're going under contract, we can buy this. Again, barring the PERT test. That's the one caveat. What does it look like for you?
Yeah, I go back and forth on it. So I think there's standard due diligence that I'm going to do on every single property, kind of a lot of the times when we're on the phone with the seller or just before we call, which is, does the property have access, legal and physical? Is the property in a wetlands or a flood zone? Is there other development around it? Can I kind of see on Google Street View whether or not electric is at the lot? Is the community on city water, city sewer? Is it well and septic? Kind of all the very, very basic levels of due diligence. With that being said, if it's a newer market, and I can tell it's a great deal. I'll usually put it under contract because the worst thing that can happen is us canceling it, and it's a pain in the ass to cancel it sometimes. But usually it's just sending one cancellation agreement, sending a cancellation to the title company, because there's certain things where speed will kill deals. So if you have a seller that, at least on paper, it looks like it's going to be a deal, because within that same due diligence, I always look at whatever the closest and most recent sale is. So if the closest and most recent sale for a very similar property was $100,000 and the seller told us, hey, we'll sell it to you for $40,000, a lot of times I'm going to try and lock it up under contract instantly. Like, get them on the phone, fill out the contract on DocuSign, have them on the phone with you so you can get that agreement signed, and then you can kind of handle everything else. And, you know, that also kind of, one of the biggest factors with that is the actual seller avatar, where I think you can kind of categorize these people as distressed or not distressed pretty fast, of how quickly they're looking to close. You can tell within their language. And if they're looking to close really quickly, it's super important to get it locked up under contract as quick as possible. But beyond that, there's also a lot of sellers out there, and Dan, I know you've experienced this too, where they're not really distressed. And it's like, thank God I've got them on the phone right now. Like, I am not going to let them get off the phone until we have an agreement in place, because I don't know how many deals you've done where you've gotten a verbal agreement, you've sent the DocuSign or sent it via mail or email or something like that, and you never hear from them again, even if you're following up for, you know, every day or weeks on end. So it depends, but always the standard due diligence before we go under contract, and then depending on the actual deal, we'll try and wrap it up as quickly as possible. And one final point kind of on that, we are really focusing on doing multiple offers with any property we're looking to get under contract. An example of that is this deal that we're doing out in Colorado. It's a 33 lot portfolio with mining claims, recently inherited. And I gave them two offers. One, I gave them an $85,000 30-day close offer, and then I gave them a $190,000 90-day close option. And they countered with a $95,000 30-day close option, because they just wanted to get rid of it. And being able to, you know, make multiple offers. I don't know anything about mining claims or mining rights, but being able to buy something at a substantial discount compared to what I know, I think is of greater importance to me than doing all of the due diligence I possibly can before actually getting it under contract.
Yeah, agreed. I think you said just about everything that needs to be said there. The main thing I'll say, just to summarize or to end, is we have gotten a little more quick to put things under contract with a long DD period, and just tell the title company, if we're unsure about anything, hey, don't start the title search yet, so that we don't incur a charge if it falls out. Because I used to be where we would not put anything under contract unless we knew we could close it at that price. So got a little more liberal there, but still definitely not the type to be canceling all the time. But moving on, I see a couple questions that are corollaries of each other at the top here. And the first is, what are some ways to step up the land game from just simple flips to large projects that typically include entitlement, subdivisions, roads, utilities, etc.? And in this case, especially if you're an out-of-country investor. I know Mason will have a lot to say on this. I probably do too. So I'll just speak to what I'm doing in my own business, and then maybe you can do the same, Mason. So first thing I want to say is, watch out for the pitfall of doing something just to say you've done it. So it sounds really nice to say you're doing a major subdivision, but a lot of people go broke doing major subdivisions. Many of the lots that both Mason and I have flipped all over the country are finished in subdivisions, and those were failed subdivisions initially, where someone put the millions of dollars and years of work into doing the project, and then the market changed or something happened where they went broke. So I personally like as much simplicity and the quickest velocity of capital possible. When I think of some of these huge projects, I think of that more of being something you do when you're incredibly wealthy. You're just trying to preserve and slowly multiply your money, where you can go put millions of dollars into something and take 3, 5, 10 years to actually fully do the project. So just a quick little caveat there. Now, to answer more specifically, in my business, new construction has been the main value add way that I've been able to step up my business now, both to create rental inventory where I'm building duplexes that I'm just keeping, and then also just spec homes to sell. And so I haven't done any major subdivisions, just small little improvements. So that's how I'm doing it. Mason, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head of ego is going to be the enemy in any of these big deals, where if you're doing them just for the sake of doing them, then it might not make sense. And I think you have to look at whatever your active business is and really try to figure out why it is you're looking to grow or expand. Have you maxed out and hit every constraint within the business that you are currently running and operating that's profitable and successful? Or, is this like the logical next step within your business? It's something that it's easier for me to give advice on than take the advice, because entrepreneurship there's so many shiny objects and it's so boring doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I think with doing these larger projects, it turns into a full-time job managing one of these projects, where depending on rereading this question and everything, like if you're doing a major subdivision, that's your job. It's not like you're going to be doing a major subdivision and flipping land on the side and doing all this other stuff. Typically within whatever agreement that you have with your capital partners or your LPs, because you might be the GP on it or the sponsor for the deal that you go out and raise money for in a syndication capacity, you're going to be getting paid a salary to manage this project to that degree. I think kind of the logical next steps, though, within the land business is, okay, I want to gain more experience so I can start doing bigger deals. There's a lot of easy counties and easy cities to work in where you can do just a simple lot split. And if you can find a county to work in where it's, okay, the process takes 30 days and it costs $5,000 to take this 10-acre lot and split it into 2 5-acre lots, because I see that 5-acre lots are selling for more. I think what you have to do is look at your business and figure out how to add that as a disposition strategy for the type of deals that you're already doing. You're already buying 10-acre lots, super simple. Now you have the ability in certain counties that you might be working in to add this as a strategy to make the exit more appealing. And then from there, you have to really just examine yourself of, do I want to become a full-time developer? And for this particular listener, if you're out of country, that's probably not going to work really well. Or what level do you want to get involved in projects like this? Potentially it's bringing the capital to the table of maybe you want to be involved and be a little bit more than a passive investor involved in a project and be, privy to some of the conversations that are having for one of these larger minor subdivisions or a major subdivision. But I think it's really making sure you're not doing this just for the sake of doing it, and that it's a real logical next step within your business.
No, I think that's great advice. And to your whole point, that's why I'm doing the new construction, because I can do it very easily. I have the pieces and parts in place in a market I know very well. So it's not much additional work or complexity or headache at all. It's just what I've been doing for years. So to that end, the corollary question from the same listener is, if you're transitioning to large projects, how do you find a knowledgeable partner who has experience and can walk the properties, etc.? This is a question I wanted to answer because essentially what he's asking is, if I want to learn something from somebody, how do I go find someone that knows that skill, that thing, and learn from them? And so ultimately, I've found people by going to real estate meetups. That's how I learned how to build houses. That's how I learned about land. I worked for them. I helped them in their business any way that I could. You can pay people. I wanted to learn about Airbnbs, so I paid a consultant. If I want to learn about something and I can't find someone just to help or work for or provide value to, I pay them. So those are really the main two ways. Mason, or anything to add to that?
Yeah, those are great pieces of advice, because that's exactly how you found your mentors. Pay for someone to do it, and make sure if you're paying someone to do it that they're actively still operating in that capacity of whatever business that is, or they've had an illustrious career where they've done, 10,000 units and they have the portfolio to say it. Because the thing is, there's a lot of people online and on social media that are selling these courses that maybe did 1 or 2 deals and have never actually, or they're not continuing to do it. And the challenge with getting involved in these larger projects is the regulations surrounding development are constantly changing. And if you're not tuned into what's going on in whatever county or city that you're doing business in, whatever they did for their one project that they did 10 years ago might not be relevant at all to what they're attempting to teach you on. So I think Dan's ideas are great. I think figuring out someone within your actual network right now that is connected to someone within this space is crucial to, or a good idea too, because it gives you the ability to have a warm handoff of, oh, Dan, let me introduce you to my friend that's doing this that you need, because then there's the warm handoff component, which creates a sense of trust as versus, some weird obligation from someone you don't necessarily know. And then I think the last thing is, depending on your state of business that you're in and kind of what you're looking to do, go get a job. Like if you're looking to go get into this industry, like go look for like an entry-level job within a company that's doing it at a super large scale. There's huge builders and huge developers that are constantly hiring out there. Go interview for a position. If they don't have one, figure out who the hiring manager is and just say, hey, I'd be, why not apply kind of to just go work a job. I think even though Dan and I are both entrepreneurs that own our own companies, there's nothing wrong with going and getting a job in a corporation that can teach you the ropes for a few years, and then you can go off and apply it on your own. So I think that's kind of the best way to go about finding a mentor or someone, because you need to look at the equation and figure out if you're adding any value to them, what value is it? And that might just be paying someone the right amount of money. Let's look at another question here. I would love to watch someone pick a market from scratch and explain how they would tackle the new market. See what details I am missing / overlooking. I think, Dan, you want to take this one because I've got a lot of thoughts on picking markets versus unpicking markets as well.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this because we have several questions. Clearly, this is on everyone's mind, right? We have several questions asking some variation of this. So I was kind of sitting here prepping, thinking about how I found all of my most profitable markets, and quite a few of them were the markets were recommended to me by realtors in those states that were doing a ton of business. In fact, most of my markets came that way, or from friends that were in the business prior. So a lot of it just through referrals from competent people. Found a good market in South Carolina using ChatGPT recently. And then I found one of my favorite markets that I've been in for years now by simply looking around Zillow at ratios of lots sold in the last 90 or 180 days versus that came on the market, and looking for places with crazy ratios, where there's 1.5 as many that have sold in that time frame versus have come on the market, the high rate, crazy ratios like that. And but looking for markets I'd never heard of, because just in my position, I know dozens of people in this space. I hear about land all day long from all kinds of friends and acquaintances. And so I have a decent sample size. If I find somewhere that's got a massive amount of sales, little inventory, and I've never heard of it and don't know anyone doing business there, that's a good sign. So unfortunately, I know this is less of a quantitative answer than our listeners might want, but those are the ways that I have found all of my markets up till now.
Well, I think your kind of last answer to that question there is what the standard is to go find a market. I think start with an area that you have a certain amount of familiarity with. And it could have been just hearing about it on the news, or it's close to where you live. And hop on Zillow, hop on Redfin, and compare what the sold amount of properties in the last 90 to 180 days to the for sale amount of properties, both currently on the market as well as what's new that's come on the market. That gives you a certain amount of like what that turnover rate in a market is, of what your expected inventory hold time is, where if an equal amount of properties are coming on the market that have sold in the last 90 days, you can expect your hold time to be give or take right around that 90-day mark, assuming that you're priced appropriately. So, but backing up a little bit of how do you even figure out about these places? Just like Dan said, networking with people in the industry, going to real estate meetups and figuring out where people are investing, being involved in these land communities like what Dan and I have, as well as others that we're involved in, and ask where people are investing. I think one beautiful thing about the land investing community is there's a good amount of transparency. People will tell you where they're doing business, because we don't view others as competition. But backing up and looking kind of at a more macro level, look at what the census data is showing. Look at what migration patterns are going on of what states are people leaving and what states are people moving to, what large state level tax changes are going on, what development changes at the state level are going on to incentivize new job growth, new building, that all of that data, if you don't know how to look it up, just look up what I'm saying of where are people moving in 2024. U-Haul has data, like Atlas Fans has data, the census has data. I think also look at what the biggest companies in the U.S. are putting out. PwC, BlackRock, Deloitte, they all come out with annual white papers on what the real estate market and expectation is. We're recording this in September of 2024. It'll probably come out right around the end of this month or October of 2024. That's usually right around whenever these big four companies and larger private equity and real estate groups come out with their annual reports. So in 2023, a lot of the reports suggested that the best markets in the United States were going to be the Sun Belt and the Southeast, as well as the South just in general. There's a few pockets within the Midwest that are doing well. And even though those are all great markets, and Dan does a ton of business in the Southeast, I do a decent amount in the Sun Belt. I personally am narrowing my scope to do more deals in my backyard. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which is consistently ranked as one of the top 10 or top 20 places to live in the country. There's a ton of land east of Colorado Springs that's available, where as Colorado Springs grows, people are going to, within the city that were here 20, 30 years ago, they're looking for more land and they're looking to escape the traffic and the development. And there's a lot of desire for larger acreage tracts just east of me. So I'm focusing a lot of my marketing and a lot of my efforts on properties that I can go drive to myself. And that's where I started in this business personally, was in a vacation town that I loved visiting. And I still do business there. And I think to like kind of summarize my monologue, look at the macro level data, macro level trends of migration patterns and what the largest groups in the country are coming out with of what they think is going to happen. Zoom in on Zillow and see these individual subdivisions and submarkets where the transaction data is occurring, and base it on something that you're familiar with and a place that you want to invest. I think there is that emotional component to it, where there's a ton of markets that we both do business in that, let alone I would never want to live, I probably wouldn't even want to visit. And that's okay, because my opinion is irrelevant when it comes to business, but there's also something nice to be able to walk a property and be like, you know what, I could see myself living here. But I think I can stop there for a little bit on market selection.
Yeah, let me just highlight what you said. Many of the places I do business, I would never want to go. And I have found consistently places that have recent accelerating consumer demand, but have historically had a bad connotation, have been very, very, very profitable. So I'm glad you said that. And then also your other point about, if you know somewhere better than everyone else because you grew up there or have some connection to it, or you just know everybody, that can be a huge opportunity. So I think that's enough for market selection. I wanted to hit this one here because I see a few questions kind of pertaining to it. Do you continue to mail your existing list, or do you try to contact them with other forms of marketing? Both. So everywhere that is prime for us, where we want to keep doing business, we mail on a consistent iteration, and then we cold call on a consistent iteration. So in a lot of these markets, every 4 to 6 months, we'll mail them again, we'll call them all again. Now, you need to make sure you're marking people that are hostile or tell you to F off, do not mail. Leads that are already in the pipeline, if you have a strong conversation going, I like to mark them do not mail, do not call, so we don't hit them again. But otherwise, we just keep hitting the same markets over and over and over, because I think a lot of times people think about this business wrong, where it's, oh, am I finding the seller? How do I say this? That I mail once and there's a set group of sellers that are my sellers. And there are at that moment, but over the course of the next 2, 3, 5 years, there's going to be other people that weren't your sellers day one that become your sellers, and you need to be ever present in their mind when they are ready to sell, right? And so it's just like I get those in Colorado Springs. I would get Purple Mountain home buyers over and over and over again mailing me, and they've been doing it for years and years. And I'm probably never going to be their avatar, hopefully, right? But they do it for a reason. They're making money, because when people think about, I need to sell my house quickly, they think of that company. It's the same concept. So,
yeah, agreed. And I think so often people will expect that response to occur initially because we're seeking instant gratification with this business. And whenever it takes 6, 7, 10 mailers to no response, we've had instances where we've mailed 9 times and cold called once, and we closed the deal right after the first cold call. And they didn't see our name, or they didn't even recognize it. They had shredded it and threw it away. And going back to kind of what I said before of why we feel comfortable talking about a lot of the markets we're doing business in, is our marketing material might not appeal to someone, but you might send a really specific, unique set of marketing material that appeals to someone's religion or race or background or anything at all that might make them connect with you on a more personal level that's going to make that deal occur. So I think that if you have a market that's producing, the cost is relatively minimal for you to be able to kind of hammer it through every single channel that you possibly can. Social media advertising is a new one that we've been doing that you can get pretty specific with the areas that you're targeting with social media advertising. But yeah, if you have a market that's producing, don't stop doing it. I think kind of on the flip side of it, to continue along, the next question this person asks is, when is it time to give up on a market and move on to the next one? I think that if there's big changes that occur in a market that historically was producing for you, it's fine to give up. Like that deal we did in Denison where impact fees went from 0 to 13K overnight. I'm not interested in doing any deals out there anymore, because that's a change that occurred that we could not, influence, I guess, or have any control over. But I'd say if I haven't gotten a deal in a market that's producing in maybe 9 months, I think I would probably stop marketing to that. But I don't necessarily have like a set criteria. Dan, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I don't have a set criteria either, but I would just really want to drive home the point that everything is cyclical, especially in real estate. And so Pueblo West is a great example of this. It was a great market to build in 2018, 2019. And then commodity prices went crazy. Finding labor was really hard. Building for the next few years was very challenging, but flipping land there was awesome. Prices went up like crazy. Sellers had bought next to nothing, price-wise next to nothing. So it was just excellent for flipping. Well, that market decelerated again late 2022, especially into 2023 and this year. And there's a huge oversupply of land, but building makes sense again. So I'm building there again. I'm not flipping any land there right now. And so just keeping your eye on the pulse and keep checking, the last 90, 120 days, and having good realtors will really help you with this. That can keep the pulse of a market, keep your hand on the pulse. And I think just keeping top of mind that it's always going to be cyclical, and you might not be giving up on a market, but you might be putting it on hold, or, okay, it doesn't make sense to flip, but it makes sense to build, or it's depending on what your strategies are. So I don't have a concrete metric for you, but if sales really, really slow down and inventory grows dramatically, watch out for that. Might be time to put it on hold, speaking just to basic land flipping.
Agreed. And I think whenever you look at whatever your strategy of doing business is, you can extend the time horizon. I think so often in this business, people have the idea that you're going to become a millionaire overnight. It takes a really long time to get this right. It takes years to get this right. And didn't I still make mistakes in this business? And I think that, on the market selection side, there's markets that I might not be crushing it in, but I know there's other people that are crushing it in. And it's probably not because the market is bad, but it's because I am spreading myself across too many markets to be able to effectively do business in each single one. And it's better to have just a couple that you know like the back of your hand. Like there's markets that Dan and I know street by street, where the due diligence process is super simple because I can look at it and tell you exactly how much it's worth and how long it's going to take to sell and whether that price point works for us or not. A lot of these questions are actually very, very similar. So we will try not to repeat them for the most part, but here's one where, on the topic of due diligence, could you share a recent example of a deal where thorough due diligence saved you from potential pitfalls? What were the key findings? Dan, do you have one?
I have a couple. Easiest one is just perk test. Just failed a perk test. We didn't expect it to. No flood zone, no wetland, visibly totally dry, surrounded by buildings. That lot failed. It would have been extremely expensive to do an engineered septic. And so it just, in effect, was worthless because of the cost to the septic just made it not worth doing. So that's an easy example. Ran into one recently, a weird one in Georgia. You're aware of this one, Mason, where upon getting all the title search back and the commitment and the original plat, there was an easement recorded from the Army Corps of Engineers, a big easement that had, it's a weird backstory, but basically the long and the short is it made a huge portion of the lot non-buildable, dramatically devalued it. It was kind of bizarre, and we still don't have clarity on what all the purposes and what their involvement with the land is, but it's irrelevant to the question. So you've got to have your title search and have your title agent or attorney checking that and making sure there aren't any unknown easements or anything like that. And then one more point I want to make, or example, one of my buddies, he had one in New York, and he thought it was a great deal, was going to buy it, no wetlands on the National Registry. Turns out that there's a separate New York-specific wetland map, and the New York wetlands were covering it, and he found this out just by finding a local expert who knew land in that area very, very well. So that's another example where that would have been worthless, and he would have wasted, I don't remember what the acquisition price was, but he would have wasted all that money on what was essentially worthless. So got to have a local expert. But any examples on your end, Mason?
Yeah, Dan, I'm your buddy with that New York land.
Oh, I couldn't remember. I'm sorry. I couldn't remember who.
No, but that right there, I think, is a great example of it, where it was 35 acres in Clay, New York. There's a brand new development just south of it. And the 1 acre lots in that subdivision were selling for $80,000 off market to a builder that was building and buying like crazy. And I spoke to the city commissioner for Clay, New York, and said, hey, this is what our plan would be. It'd be to go in, subdivide it. I see that there's some federal wetlands on it, but not enough to really impact it. Our goal would be get 8 to 12 lots. And he's like, yep, looks good. I can make that happen. And then I spoke to a land specialist agent out there that had sold over 100,000 acres of land, like $500 million in land sales in his career. And he introduced me to that very state-specific wetlands that I never would have looked at. And it saved us what would have amounted to be, the land was worth 100. We had it under contract at 270,000. So saved us potentially about $200,000, give or take, on what would have been a dud of a deal. But I think another example is just kind of focusing on the zoning component, where I've got a lot under contract right now in Philadelphia that we're going to cancel the deal. It's zoned like RX5 or something like that, which means you can put like 5 units on it, but it's not the right kind of multifamily units that any developers are looking for. And the zoning process changes would end up taking like 2 to 3 years maybe to get that done. So I think looking at zoning and figuring out whether or not the intended use matches what the end buyer or builder would desire in that particular area is one of those DD components that we've added to our process and checklist to make sure that, hey, if it's something out of the norm, double check with an expert. And I think that's probably the main component about all due diligence that's the most important. Like, you can look up all this stuff on your own, but if you have a great realtor, like an actually great realtor that understands land and new builds and development, they will save your ass time and time and time again.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't we were doing a call last week with a bunch of people bringing deals all over the country, and they wanted help evaluating them. And for all the ones that aren't just simple infill with endless identical comps, we can't really help you. We can give a basic due diligence sheet, but you got to speak to a local. Like it's just ridiculous to try and do this all over the place without locals that know everything about the market. So you got to have that. All right, Mason, looking through this, I think the remaining questions are variations of the questions we've already answered. Anything else you want to say or hit on or anything at all?
Yeah, I think potentially this one at the end, we can talk about just a little bit, which are, what are the factors you take into consideration when buying land? Green flags and red flags, which is similar to the due diligence, similar to the market selection, but a question that I get seemingly asked a lot more often is, where should I buy land? I'm looking to start a land investing business. What market should I do business in? And I think you have to really look at yourself and your business model first and foremost, because you can make money in any market in the country. Whether you're buying desert squares for $1 a lot and selling them for $1,000, or buying huge tracts of raw land and going through the entitlement process and developing it and putting in utility districts and everything, you can make a lot of money. And I think you have to look at a few things internally of how much time are you able to commit to this business? How much money do you have able to commit to this business, both for marketing and systems cost, as well as the cost for the actual acquisition of the land? And why are you doing this business? What made you decide to choose this niche rather than something else? Not to say you need to, have some super philosophical answer, but if you're not able to devote a good amount of time and a good amount of money into this business, it's not going to work for you. And it's the same for any business, whether you're wholesaling houses or fixing and flipping houses. I think you have to really look at kind of yourself and your own internal processes before you're trying to you're putting the cart before the horse of, Google good markets to invest in. And that's going to answer your question better than just as well as Dan or I could ever possibly answer your question. So I think, what is your, capabilities, and what is your cash reserve amount as a business owner? I don't know if you have any more philosophical points to add to that particular question.
Yeah, I just want to double down on what you said about, what are your goals? Are you coming into this business with a decent amount of liquid cash where you just want to multiply that? Or are you coming into the business broke, just trying to make money as fast as you can? If you're the latter of those two, I'd go somewhere with tons of builders, homogeneous infill lots where you can do quick assignments, right? A lot of the land that I am flipping right now, it is pretty much impossible to sell to anyone but an end user. That deal I referenced earlier, we bought it at 52, it's under contract at 92. No builder's going to buy that. That's someone that wants to build their dream home there. They love it, right? So that's not appropriate if you need to make money as fast as possible and you don't have cash to close. On the flip side, if you have millions of dollars liquid, right, and you're just looking for a new business, I wouldn't do either of those options. I would be doing some form of improvement, whether it's small subdivides or new construction, something like that. Or, maybe you're just looking for passive income. Maybe go buy a bunch of lots, build nice rentals, and keep them forever, totally cashed out, right? So it just depends what your goals are. I'm calling to make an offer on a lot right now. It's not flippable, but it has the water tap already paid, and it'll be a great build down the road because I can do that. I have the liquidity to do that, and that's part of my business, but maybe that's not appropriate for you. So what a deal is really depends on what you're trying to do and where your cash is, or what your cash reserves look like, and timeframes and that sort of thing. So anyways, a little more vague, but I think important to hit on.
No, I agree. I think so often people want to start a business because they think it's the cool, right, or sexy thing to do. I think a lot of times people want to grow or scale their business because it seems cool. And the answer a lot of the time is, what are you doing that's working really well for you right now? And why are you not doing 50 times more of that exact same thing? And the answer is usually, it's boring. I don't want to keep doing it because it's boring. And that's fine. I respect it. That's my issue too. In business, I have a tendency to distract myself by getting involved in 1,000 different things. But if you have something going and it works really well, figure out a way to outsource it, delegate it, or sell that business to then potentially pursue something new. Because we're not advocating of never do anything new, but you really just need to kind of figure yourself out first. But I feel like, Dan, there are some more questions on this list, but they're almost all the exact same, which is related to due diligence, market selection, and kind of growth and expansion within this business. But I don't necessarily have anything else I want to hit on. We're hitting 45 minutes on the show. You want to take us out, or any last minute wisdom?
Yeah, no, I think we hit on everything we wanted to hit on. The only thing I would add, guys, let us know whether you liked this or not. And if you did, please tag us on social media. We'll post reels from this and give us more questions to answer if you did like it, or just any feedback at all would be really helpful. And if you did like it, please leave us a 5-star rating or review wherever you listen. Otherwise, we're going to sign off for today. This is Dan Haberkost and Mason McDonald with the Big Picture Blueprint. Catch you guys next time.